So we are back with the second part of our interview with Kip Ioane. If you haven't listened to part one, please do that before you jump into this episode, part two. So after my interview with Kip, I struggled. While I agree this is a big issue and agree we have to actively engage in helping to come up with a healthier vision for manhood, I struggle with this being intentional with my language around this topic. If I was coaching a group of young men or adult men today, if I was honest with myself, I might be guilty of falling into that trap of locker room talk. Like I could see myself unintentionally challenging players to be tougher on the court or celebrate players for their toughness by just making comments like, you've got some pair, or stop playing like a girl. And as I reflected on the fact that I could still potentially be guilty of using some of this language if I was back in that type of environment, which I'm not currently. I'm mostly coaching underage, young girls and boys, and I do some team performance coaching with some adult teams, and I've been in locker rooms with some adult men, but my role is fairly limited, so I'm not really giving those types of speeches, but I could just see myself being guilty of that. And so when I thought about that, my first move internally was defensive. Like I wanted to make light of it. I wanted to say like, well, it doesn't really matter, just we're joking, boys will be boys, or people being a little bit too sensitive, or this just seems like another topic where political correctness is going too far for me, right? The more I thought about this though, honestly, the more I realized two big things. Number one, if you listen to this podcast, I talk a lot about being intentional in everything you do, right? Be intentional in everything you do, and how the simple shift in our words that we use can shift how a player experiences our message. A simple change in language can move that message from feeling like we're calling them out to actually calling them up. Secondly, the more I reflect on this, the more I thought, how much more impactful would it be instead of telling a young man, hey, you got some cojones, man, you really brought it today, like something like that, if I was just to change that and say, hey, you were absolutely fearless today. You didn't back down. Your display of courage and winning every 50-50 ball was incredible, or something like that. Well, when I think about those two, I'll choose the latter any day, every day. And I'm sharing all of this because I know that if there's some other men out here might be listening to this, and you, like me, you might get a little bit defensive. And I want to give my personal example as what I was struggling with in this topic, because it might help you get a little bit more curious and a little bit less defensive, like I did, in the interview. And so, my challenge for you is like, hey, this might be hard for you to hear. I get it. It's challenging, maybe some of the ways that you operate in the past, maybe some of the ways that I operated in the past as well. But if we're committed to being the best that we can be for our athletes, the young men that we're leading, let's always listen with curiosity and open mind to how we can be better. And that's what, Kip's going to talk about in today's episode, is how can coaches connect with and lead young male athletes more effectively. His work with teams of men is just phenomenal, and he's going to share and help us in our conversation today as we explore a coaching philosophy that goes beyond yelling and wins. He's going to share some powerful stories and some actionable strategies for using vulnerability as a strength, co-creating a positive team culture, and helping athletes to find their authentic selves. Kip is also going to discuss a new approach to coaching young male athletes that focuses on emotional intelligence and challenging traditional masculinity, often referred to as the man box. Instead of relying on old school aggressive coaching methods, the conversation highlights the importance of fostering self-awareness in us and others, creating a safe space for difficult conversations, and also empowering athletes to question harmful messages that they might be receiving from society, music, and even family members. Today, this isn't just about coaching a better game, it's about building better men. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nurbin, and I'm here with my co-host, Betsy Butterick. The mission of this podcast is to help you to become a better leader and build a better team culture. To get the notes to this in every episode of the podcast, all you need to do is subscribe to the Team Culture Toolbox. There's a link in the details of this episode, or you can do so at tocculture.com. Also, check out Betsy's blog on Substack at Betsy Butterick. How so much of this comes back to our own reflection around how we're showing up, and I think some of this becomes difficult. I'm just taking the position of some coaches that are like, man, what do I got to do? Police the locker room
Right.
behavior and the locker room talk. But I mean, we probably, you know, started to walk around in 2015, 2016. Locker room talk just kind of became like this
Right.
justification that we could say whatever we wanted. So we've got a lot of work to do to work back from there,
Yeah.
from young men are hearing. But I think what you're touching on there is by bringing awareness, because I was wondering, like, at the end of the day, like, there are so much messages around young men, whether it's podcasts and social media, Instagram. Like,
Yeah.
I gotta take all that on. I gotta take all that on. Like, I gotta make arguments against all that. And you're just
Right.
like, you what you just shared with me made sense to me. It's like, no, you just gotta help them see how all, like, just this new perspective where they
Yeah.
start to look at that with a new lens, a new
Yes.
perspective of like, oh yeah, that's not true at all. And then
Right.
all of a sudden all that becomes, I won't say irrelevant, but they
Yeah.
can see how false that is and how,
Yes.
like, that is leading them down to a place that, we don't want them to go. They don't want to go either, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we know the power of that is tenfold compared to us yelling at them anyway. Right? I mean, you guys know as expertise in working with coaches, we know the intensity and the frequency runs out with what we can say anyway after 2 weeks. Like if I just yell all day, eventually that doesn't move him at all. Like, oh, Kip's loud again. It doesn't have the shock value anymore. But when their boys say it, when their boys reinforce, or their boys have questions, like even if they're arguing, like, hey, conflict, like iron sharpens iron, all the cliches we hear. Okay, well, then let's have them. Let them disagree on some stuff that they heard in their favorite rap song. Let's have them challenge one another. Like, hey, man, that sounds a little sketchy. Oh, it's not sketchy. Or are you in the real box, right? Like all the. Let them do it. Let them have those spaces, and most likely, at least at the high school level, maybe this is true at college. They're going to come to you or their position coach or their recruiting coordinator and say, "Coach, what do you think about this? You heard that new little Dirk? What do you think? He said. What do you think?" And at least they're engaging, like you said, JP. Curiosity is a superpower, and if we can give them that for life, at the very least, like I'm not saying that is the end all to violence against women and all these harms that I want to make sure we're not committing, but it's the start. It's the start of being able to challenge the messaging that they get from loved ones, that they get from social media, that they get from music, they get from hip hop, or they get from their own internal policeman that tells him he's not man enough today, that his scoreboard says you didn't earn enough man points. Like, man, I don't believe that. Like, what? I think that's nonsense. That's a start of these things.
And I love that you said, like, once you see the man box, you can't unsee it. And that awareness provides the opportunity for challenge, for
Yeah.
choice, for change, hopefully, for many of our
Yes.
young men to get to choose what they feel is authentically them versus what they're
Yes.
told they need to be. If I can ask a more personal
Yep.
question, Kip, what was one of the first things that you really had to unlearn
Ooh.
once you became
Ooh.
aware of the man box?
Oh, and it might even go further back. I took a gender roles in society class with my then girlfriend, my wife now, in college. And I took it, Betsy, purely because she was my ride to campus. I was like, oh, God. Well, I'll go in here. And I was one of two men in there. And the savagery is the wrong word, but I felt like he was a savage because he didn't put up with none of my nonsense with my takes. And the professor, JP, the model, was a man teaching this class. And I had to really grapple with from that class through all this unlearning. My dad's like my role model. He's like my hero. Like my father he was a 40-year teacher, college and high school coach, like known across the community. But I really had to grapple with Pop would come home and sit his ass on the chair and start barking orders. And my mom just did it. And it was like, that was just the norm in my house. Like my dad worked his butt off, but so did my mom. She was a Montessori school principal. But he got the space to come home and unwind his way. And she had to carry his unwinding plus my brother and I's unwinding while putting herself to the side. And I had to really grapple with that reality. Like, here's this man that I love is renewed around the community, but I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to do that. And just sharing that in a space, I don't remember the prompt in a team setting, allowed two kids in the room and another assistant coach to share, like, yeah, I have something similar. This aspect of my dad that I love, this aspect of my grandfather that I really love. That was probably the start of it. But then, and also, Betsy, just really being cognizant of the words I choose. And it's not easy. Like I've done many push-up ladders and board pushing that I would require my young men to do with the language choices I make in spaces. And that, because words matter. in that,
Mm.
right? And that is a thing that I've had to be, especially in my heaviest emotional failures, whether it's a big game loss, a frustrating day with life in general, that just because I'm feeling this angst, does that give me, like I mentioned before, that doesn't give me the right to come in here and bleed on you guys, right?
Mm.
But I'm feeling this today. And for coaches too, I think it's an easy one in the pre-practice circle. Guys, today's been a heavy one. My son made this choice. My dad's going through this. I'm gonna really try not to let that affect how I coach that. I just want to name it up front. And suddenly you'll
Mm.
get a kid that's not gonna do that in the circle, but he might come up to you and be like, Coach, man, I had a bad day. Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of those, that doesn't mean I don't still call them to be their best. It doesn't mean our program's like, oh, we lost, let's throw a party. It's not that at all. But we're unwilling to sacrifice young people towards a scoreboard. We're not going to do it. We're going to get there together.
Your personal story actually really resonated with, honestly, like a fear of mine to step
Mm,
into this space, because it's the fear of like young men we could be coaching, whether they're 14,
yeah.
22, or 30, could have this role model in their life, whether it's their father, their grandfather, or somebody else who's been a mentor. And like you said, they tell him the triple threat, and the triple threat seemed to serve him well.
Yep.
Whatever, like you're talking about basketball,
Yes.
that position, like, and then you had that great metaphor of like, yeah, okay, maybe that worked, or worked okay for him at least, maybe not for
Right.
your mother, but like the idea of just like you're challenging young men to think about people that are really important in their life, and to be a little bit more self-aware that, maybe
Yeah.
that's not how I want to be, how I want to show
Yes.
up in the world. And I
Yeah.
just feel like that's scary for me as a coach, because boy, like, do I become that coach where I'm trying to come in there and become a wedge between the father and the son
Oh,
and things
right.
like that?
Right.
Yeah, like, do you see what I'm
Right.
saying in that? Like, I think
No,
that,
and I think, no,
that
thank you, JP. That's real. That's absolutely. But I think it's also requires you, and I'm just using you in this analogy, but any coach that works with us and me as well, we all talk, and I know you have a great thing that you do with how do we bring parents into these conversations with our programs. Well, we recruited to it in college. So we named up front, your son will spend more time talking with me about hopefully avoiding living to porn scripts than he does his first semester talking about our zone trap. It's just a
Mhm.
reality of what we do. But in high school too, I've had to develop, and thank goodness I was fortunate enough to get this high school job, because I had teams of men, partner high school coaches that told me pain points I'd never lived, and I've had to live them at the high school level. So, Kip, my son's 14. I don't want you to talk about consent with him yet. And I said, thank you for naming that, but I'm talking about consent with his locker and his Air Jordans. That's the consent I'm talking about, because I think you've already taught him that. I think you've done a great job telling him that's his stuff. You don't get to touch his stuff, right? That's where we're going to start. But we're going to start with emotional fluency. And I think, so all these different like navigating of when and where these conversations are appropriate, and where I'm giving you, the parent, knowledge of the topics. We always print out the exposure points throughout the year. And the freshmen will have 7 rather than 14 that JV has, rather than 20 that varsity has. But you see it up front. There's always the opt-out option. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a reality at the high school level. You can opt out of this thing. Absolutely. Haven't had it yet, right? Haven't had it yet. Doesn't mean it's not coming. But also, JP, I think we model like what does conflict resolution look like? What is if I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to be transparent, then I got to be willing to take back from mom and dad. I don't like that, Kip. I got to be willing. I got to be willing to talk about that, and I think that requires your admin to be in on the thing too.
yeah, I mean, just building off of that, like, uh, it's a struggle for coaches that sometimes just don't even yell or demean their players to make them work hard. Like,
Yeah,
that new type of coaching creates
yeah,
resistance, and sometimes players are like, well, that's good coaching, and parents say, well, that's good coaching. Like,
yeah.
what you're talking
Great
about
call.
is such a big leap,
Yeah,
in some aspects. But what you're saying there is, by being upfront, by saying, hey, this is what I'm about, you're almost inviting parents and families into that conversation, or to kind of support that growth, right?
2 things on that. One of some of my most powerful sessions that really impacted me was when we said we're going to do a dad session on this. We're going to do a mom and dad session on teams of men. I'll come in and I'll show you stats from the Equimundo State of Men study that scare me to death, and I think are going to scare parents to death, about the loneliness men feel. They don't want their baby boy feeling that way, and that kind of opens some discussions. But also I do get a lot of, well, coach, I think my son really responds to hard coaching. I don't know if he responds to hard coaching. He might respond to precision, and we're going to demand details from him. We're going to just demand execution from him. I'm just not willing to belittle who he is to get that. I'll just sit his ass. Like, he's just not going to play, right? Does that make sense? Like, the ultimate weapon is not how much you yell. It makes you feel better, but it doesn't mean he's going to change his behavior and his choice on that kick out that he's missed 6 games in a row. He's just not going to play. And we're going to sit side by side with him and talk about why he's not playing. But it's not hard coaching. It's precision you want. And we do that.
Again, communication, total nerd, and the power of small shifts in language to either more accurately name the thing, like you're talking about. It's not hard coaching. He wants precision. Like, he values information. And I'm thinking about a college volleyball player, female, and she said in a session, she said, Betsy, I know this isn't right. I think she used the word right. She said, I've talked with my therapist about this. First of all, I was like, I love that you are seeing someone. She said, I know this isn't right, but I feel like coach doesn't care about me unless she yells. And I know that comes from my dad. My dad was my club coach for 12 years. And so just the awareness sometimes isn't yet enough to create, or I'll say unlearn that association of yelling with care, because it comes from the person I love to death, my dad, right?
Yeah.
But it's a starting point to be able to kind of pull on those threads. What's coming up for me, Kip, is you talked about difficult conversations. You talked about vulnerability. So let's say you are a male coach with a male high school team, and you say something that is vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And you have a kid who, whether they say it directly to you in front of the other guys, or they say it off to the side to a teammate, like, coach was being a real PU or a BI. And interesting that they're all female words, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. So when a kid responds like that, what do you do?
What happens? Yeah. And I think, Betsy, that's one of the fears of coaches, the irrational fear rooted in the man box, is that I will suddenly have a team full of those words, right? Or they'll go with homophobic language with the same thing. Or I have never experienced a kid saying that, but I have experienced the deflection through laughter. And men are professional at this. I will uncomfortably laugh. Like, if somebody says something exceptionally misogynistic around me, I know in my brain that's awful, but I also am unwilling to risk my status in this team room by calling him out. I don't have that courage yet. I don't have the language. My coach hasn't given me language that I feel brave enough to say. So I'm just going to laugh it off. I'm just going to uncomfortably and then try to distance myself. But that laughter doesn't stop that behavior. Laughter cosigns. So I think there's those things, and that's probably worth, when you're talking about what if in this session we get that response you're mentioning, what are we going to do as coaches? Because we're going to talk about what do we do we're going to all talk about special situations in our game prep. Oh my gosh, Bill Belichick's so prepared for every fourth down and something. He's got it all on the scenario card. Well, where's our scenario card for that? What are we going to do? Right? What is going to prevent me from puffing up, feeling wounded, and dog cussing this kid? Oh, because we talked about it. Here's how we respond. Right. So I think, Betsy, that would be one of those cards. I mean, I remember downloading Mike Neighbors when he was at UW, would send out late game situation cards. He had like 80, you're up 4, 2 minutes left. Shot clock says it. We had all these cards, and we'd rep those in practice. Well, let's write out 5 real life cards. What's the hardest moment? What if a kid talks back to us in this session? What if a kid stomps off from the bench? Okay, let's rep it now. And that doesn't guarantee us absolutely we handle those situations perfectly. But I think it allows us to have a plan. And honestly, some of this I'd give to the guys too. Hey guys, before we launch into teams of men, what are our expectations in here? But also, how do you think, what happens if somebody like this doesn't sit right with you? What do you think you should be able to say to me to let me know, like, hey, that's not what my family believes? How are we creating avenues for that? Because once again, remember, it's not me preaching this is the way. It's me asking, why is this the way?
I really, it's so smart what you're sharing there, because I think when I look back at my experience, even just like a high school coach, and let's just say players are listening to music, like that has just absolutely, like, okay, there's some music that's rap music, and there's some that's just absolutely tearing women apart type of
Yep.
thing. It's just
Yep.
violence, and it's
Yep.
just making me really uncomfortable.
Yep.
And my solution back then was to just put on earmuffs,
Mm-hmm.
or it was just to call them out and say, hey, we're not listening to this music anymore. Totally,
Right.
just whatever. You can listen to your car. That's fine. Do your thing.
Yep.
But our weight room, in our locker room, we just don't do that.
Yeah.
That's it. It's either
Yeah.
I put the earmuffs on or I just tell them no.
Right.
And what you're talking about is like, it's about a conversation. It's about
Yeah.
how you step in those moments, and not from a place of judgment, but help them to walk back to just be reflective
Yeah.
in this space.
JP, thank you, because that's one of the number one things I get from coaches and like kind of our intake survey and discussions of where do you feel like this work you need it in your program, and we get back to the idea of the soundtrack to our soul, right? And so there are a couple of ways we address exactly what you're mentioning. One is I'll put up I'm a huge Tupac fan, right? Which is ridiculous now that I got guys that don't know who Tupac is and I want to scream and yell. But I'll put up the lyrics. I'll print the lyrics. I ask them to bring their favorite song with the lyrics. And then I put up all the highlighted words that are misogynistic, homophobic, violence inducing, violent sexual, like all those things. And then I literally stat it like we do analytics. Like, okay, so my favorite Pac song had 5 references that you could call misogynistic, 2 homophobic, 3 referring to violent sexual encounters. Is that who I want to be? That's one way we talk about it. Doesn't mean that moves the needle. Then we've done another one that's like, guys, why is music part of sports? What does it do? And you'll get them to say it changes my emotional state. I get more confident or I get locked in, all those different things. And then we get them to admit, well, your music is an exceptionally personal experience. Yes. Like what moves you even moves you to different places. You get hyped, you get calm. So it's really hard for us to blast one song to move us all. So how do we adjust that? Then we talk about, well, we could all do headphones, or we could all do like a day where I get the music and you get the music. And then we bring in, okay, now you guys are in that mode, but I think music does this for me and I'm 46. What if that hits me a certain way? And we just get them to the why. And JP, where we ended this last year was like, everybody has a day where their genre's played and it all has to be edited. That's where they landed. But we had the discussion of, what does it say if the music says this? Are you co-signing that? No, I'm not. Okay. Would you wear that shirt to school? It's all those things. I don't ever eliminate the songs because I drove up with Rod Wave today. But I tell you what, when I drive off, it makes me think, like, what am I blaring? Am I too old for this shit? Right. It makes me, and then I ask my son or I ask my daughter, it leads to different stuff. The outcomes, I think you're right. I think it's really hard to just demand obedience in things, but we can get to, hey, together we decided we were comfortable with this being our reality. That might change this year. We're going to run the same soundtrack to our soul. We might end up with, you know what, we really trust Tegan with the music. He puts us all of our stuff in. He gets everybody's song in there, and he knows blah 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 with the edit. Does that make sense? So like we will end up with action towards it that's not Kip mandated, and then I just get to push it away.
You're co-creating that
Yeah,
space, that music, and I love that.
because I'm not perfect either, man. There's just, it's my wife asked me, "What are you sure you're listening to that today?" I like the beat. Oh, sure you do, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that if nothing else, because I'm always trying to think, and I know JP, we do this in conversations all the time. It's like, all right, what's the actionable takeaway? Like, what's the thing that coaches can go do today that's going to start to move the needle towards having these conversations that they may feel unprepared for, or they've never had before, even with themselves. And I think about that football coach. I knew he had a daughter in college who was also an athlete, and leaving that space, he didn't know I was in there. And he said right away, Betsy, I'm sorry. I saw you in the back at the end. I apologize for what I said. And I said, hey, I can take it. Like, I've heard a lot of different things. My question would be, how would your daughter feel if she was sitting in that room listening to you talk to those guys in the way that you did? And my guess, I haven't followed up with him. My guess is he might explain how to receive a football differently these days. But to be able to be that mirror, if coaches can invite people to reflect on, like you said, not what are we doing, but why are we doing it this
Yeah.
way? You know, why is this your
Yeah.
favorite song? And I feel you, like some of them, they are just about the beat. There is a
Yep.
song I love that when I look at the lyrics, I'm like, man, this isn't great for a
Right.
lot of different reasons, but I love the beat. And
Yeah.
so, is it important enough in this space with these people at this time to set aside the things that I don't identify with or agree with and to be able to take the value from it? And I
Yeah.
think just asking the question is such an important first step towards creating conversations for change.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for talking about the coach with the daughter. And this is one of the things I think is a powerful entry point and then a proof of evolution in the work. So I think I would have told you when I started this that the ultimate fear in my brain was, well, what if this happens to my wife or my daughter, right? And then I saw, I don't know, it's probably not even a meme. I just saw a graphic that put in, she is someone's daughter, she is someone's mother, she is someone's sister, and then it cut off everything after she is someone. And that was like this and I've done that with juniors in a program. So underclassmen, we start with, do you have, if this is the program's comfort level, we start with you have a mom, grandma, sister, brother, I mean, girlfriend, all these women in your life you love and respect. So you're probably here knowing in a preventive lens you want to protect them. But if we're doing our job right in the work, you're evolving as junior year why you really see the power in Xing out the protective nature of just yours and just women have value inherently. Right. And that work is that's not like a snap your fingers, it happens, but it is an awakening in this new lens for you as we go forward in the stuff we do.
This will be the last thing, JP,
Yeah.
but Kip, I heard something recently, and because my wife and I have this conversation, we're like, why are women not at the top of our society? Like, you made fingernails, you made eyelashes, like we put food in and humans come
Yeah.
out. And I heard somebody do an introduction and they said, instead of ladies and gentlemen, they said ladies and sons of ladies, because everything flows through women. And that
Yeah.
just that perspective of like,
Yes.
ooh, you know, like this is what's true.
Right. That there's a teams of men session right there. If you let off in a football space, hey, good afternoon, sons of women, and then talk for 2 minutes, and then say, anybody, what do you guys remember about my intro? Somebody, that hand's going up and unlocking a new framing, and 5 of them are going to remember that you said that. No, that's so what we said all day. Words matter, and just using phrases repeatedly. I mean, coaches do this all the time, right? All we do is get our hashtags, and then we use it all season, right? I've done it myself. Saxon Swarm. Here we go. We press. Can we onboard some phrases that we think help unpack the man box? I think we can do that. And then the guys, even if they're at the beginning, it's Kip always says, "What's your favorite line?" It's resonating, right?
Hmm. You got me really curious now. I'm like, I want to actually dive into some research around the impact of having like fathers of sons that also have a daughter, because like having
Mm-hmm.
a daughter has definitely maybe I think it has to have shaped some of my perspective on how I want to raise my sons too, just
Right.
because you're and an extra connection there. But here's my question for you. I got two kind of questions to get to the
Okay.
door. Is just one is like I have huge respect for you, your perspective on this, how you're approaching this work. Give me some advice as a dad of an 8-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy. Like I
Oh,
just, yeah, help give me something here. I'm always interested. I always want to
yeah.
be
Well,
better.
here, hey, we're getting into that danger zone, JP, where my wife's like, "What did you tell this man to do?" I honestly, I would. The only thing I will say that I've tried to do is recognizing, and this has been a kind of a angst source for me. Is I put all this work into the guys on my team, whether that was my college team for 15 years as the head guy, or my high school team. Am I sharing these lessons with my 17-year-old son at home? Like I'm working on everybody else's baby. What about my babies? So there's been my kids would probably they'd laugh and tell you, yeah, dad always pauses the damn TV after something's said. We all know some dad lessons coming. But I've also given them, I think, where I saw JP that some of my trying to model or trying to share new ideas came back was when my daughter or my son would be like, "Don't you teach that? Aren't you kind of doing that right now? Don't you give speeches on that?" So I think that humor I think can connect bridges sometimes in the difficult conversations. But I'm unafraid to share what I taught my team not every day, but I'm unafraid to be like, hey, something came up with the team today. What do you think,
Mm.
man? And so I think that's the best I can tell you. I mean, I've tried to give as much love as my father gave me while remembering the things that I question. Like, he says this, but then he does this. So can I not live that way? And hopefully I'm
Mm.
passing the baton to my kids to do the same thing, right? To look at the love
Mm.
and embrace the love, but find their own techniques.
Yeah, and I commend you not on necessarily your perfect example, but the fact that your kids are even kind of pointed something out like that. I think that's a good place for us to be. Like, honestly, like, I'm a bit embarrassed by this, but my daughter pulled me aside the other day. She literally pulled me aside. She goes, "Dad, I got to talk to you about something." I go, "Yeah, what's up?" She goes, "You know how you tell us like not to talk bad about other people, like when they're not around?" She goes, "Yeah. So I noticed you and mom doing that recently." I was
Ah,
like, "Oh God."
no,
I was like,
yes,
I was like so
yes,
called out. I was like, "You're right. I am
right.
so thankful." And will you? I don't remember the last time I did that because I probably have done it too much lately. So you please call me out right in the moment. So I'm getting kind of emotional thinking about it, just because it is.
Awesome.
But it's a beautiful place to be. Like, is where it's like we're not trying to be perfect here, because I think I've tried to do that. I've tried to be that perfect dad that never makes mistakes. And it's just not realistic. So here's my question to get you out the door with today, before you can kind of share a little bit with us about maybe where our listeners can find you, more of your resources. But my question is just really, what's the most important part of this work for you?
Ooh, great question. I would say the vision I have and what fuels me is imagining. We talk about reimagining, and sometimes it's easier to tear down the existing than to imagine what the better is. But I can imagine a space where you can't coach 8-year-olds without a teams of men license. Because if you, right, like, and I say that knowing I would love the same thing to be required at Duke, right, for anybody, that. But I can't tell you how often I go to, whether it's for my kids as they've been growing up, and well-intentioned volunteer coaches. Thank you for volunteering to coach this flag football team in the rain in Oregon with 9-year-olds, and you showed up with clipboards and flags and footballs and cones. You had no plan on how to learn kids' names, so you can't even provide visibility, right? Does that make sense? So I don't want to. That would be my what keeps me going. JP is equipping well-intentioned people to get the outcomes they want, because intentions don't guarantee impact, right? And so as coaches, we know our intentions, and I think Betsy and you guys both. Like, I think we can paint the broad brush of most coaches have great intentions for the young people they interact with, but then they use those intentions to excuse the impact, which is negative and harmful. And I think the
Mm.
more we can equip them to live to their intention, the more I'm serving. And that's what I'd love to have the legacy be, or pass the baton to the next generation of. The next step in this is the requirement to coach is at least equal, if not greater than, your emotional fluency is your sport fluency.
Yeah, that made me. That's just such a powerful why in this. I think it really resonates. It actually makes me think back of a note that I made just as Betsy was talking earlier about kind of this responsibility versus opportunity. What's a
Yeah,
responsibility in this, and what's an opportunity, what you might miss. I would say we have to have greater coaches take more responsibility for just how their impact, even when the intention is a good intention,
right.
but their impact is not right. So
I mean,
positive. So
Betsy, you've been sorry, JP. Betsy, you've been to the Final Four and the conventions, right? I would love the convention to be less about what names on my polo and my win-loss record when we shake hands in the lobby, and more about, hey, I'm going to a culture session with JP and Betsy. Then I'm going to this KIP thing with how to drive a healthier version of masculinity. Then I'm going to Tony's thing over here, instead of the packed classrooms for the same stagger screen we've been running since 2004,
Don't
right?
get me
So
started on education. Like, I would redo all the
yes.
classes. We're going to start with
Oh my
emotional
God.
intelligence. We're going to go to vulnerability next. We're going to go to
Yes.
like interpersonal dynamics. Yes,
Yes.
from an
I
early
mean, the
age.
ethics section at the
Yeah.
ethics meeting, it's literally called Ethics and Coaching at the men's NABC convention, is 7 people are there. And it's at 8 a.m. and everyone's hungover and no one's there. But then we could all be fired with unethical choices that we make or our players make. Make it make sense. But that's a whole nother
Yes.
podcast.
The math doesn't math on that one.
No.
no, you get me fired up to do more of this work, and honestly, it's going to change the next time a coach brings me in to facilitate a conversation around team culture with their team, in particular a men's team. It's going to change maybe a few of the questions that I throw out them and just start to drive that dialogue. So I really appreciate so much of what you shared today, for coaches that want more resources, more tools to be able to be better at this area. Where should they go?
I'd honestly start, JP, with go to our website, teamsofmenllc.com, and just bookmark the blog, because I post every day the Teams of Men lens on something happening in the current sports climate, pop culture. It could be something from me. But like we said, you never fail to see curriculum activation in what's happening. So I think that's a place to start, because I always end my writing with, I would say this: if I was running your team and this was the slide I put up from Florida State's quarterback saying this in the press conference, I have 3 coach prompt questions. This is what I would say to my staff. These are player prompts. And if that's where you get comfortable with what's Kip talking about, the activation point of this work, it's free. It's every day. I love writing. I've always been a writer. Go there and you'll get something you could use on every Wednesday. You could just like, hey, coaches, we're going to read this thing, use it. Even if you disagree, the questions are not based in Kip's a genius. Second, I would probably pub my book, Mirror Training. It's on Amazon. You can get it there, because it's not just the story a little bit that we shared today, but I end every chapter with, if this book is your first year calendar, this is what you should do with your team based on chapter 1. This is what you roll out with your team based on chapter 2. So at the very least, you're going to get 8 exposure points with your team. And then you can decide, this really fits me. I like this. Then you come back to me for more stuff. But I think those are the easiest entry points for the stuff we do.
These types of conversations are why I love doing this podcast. They are just, and why we like to bring on different people, not just coach after coach after coach, out there. It's like, just, you're out there doing unique work and you're still coaching. You're still in that work. So huge thanks to actually my friend, Patrick Quirk, for recommending me to check you out. You are phenomenal. I love your work. All right, that's it for today's episode with Kip. Be sure to check him out at teamsofmenllc.com. We'll also have links in the details of this episode to learn more about him. Thank you again for listening into the Coaching Culture Podcast. If you found it valuable, please leave us a review, and most importantly, share it with someone else who might find value in it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Team Culture Toolbox, our weekly newsletter at tocculture.com.